The first time I saw the animatronic Santa Claus, it was early November. My wife and I had gone to the big box hardware store to pick up some gardening soil and new knobs for our kitchen cabinets. I hate being an adult sometimes. It didn't surprise me to find Christmas decorations already displayed prominently near the entrance. The robotic Santa Claus was sitting there on a throne, greeting us as we came in. Its eyes moved back and forth without any discernible pattern, and it waved at us rigidly in greeting, turning its head to look at us as we approached, eyes focusing on ours for just a second, then moving away. "What a creepy looking Santa," I said to my wife. "Who would ever buy that? It looks like something out of a nightmare." The Santa Claus got more frightening as we got closer to it. It was a little too realistic for my liking. The way the eyes were moving around, randomly, almost sporadically, looked a bit like a mental patient's gaze as they looked around with paranoia. His pale skin was almost human, but not quite, and I once again wondered who would ever purchase such a thing. I assumed it was for sale, but saw no price tag. I mostly just wanted to get away from it. We got what we needed and walked back towards the cash registers, once again passing by the Christmas displays and the creepy animatronic Santa Claus. Jeez, I'm glad I don't have to work in this place. That thing really creeps me out. Oh, sweet irony, how I hate you. It was early December and I was standing in front of the animatronic Santa Claus once more. Only this time I was wearing a bright red vest with a name tag stuck to the front. I couldn't help but look at the Santa bitterly as it moved its head back and forth, stopping with its eyes meeting mine, staring at me for a second, then turning away again, disinterested. "Hey Jordan, move your ass! Those Christmas bulbs aren't gonna stock themselves!" I sighed and trudged back over to my dolly stacked high with boxes of Christmas lights. Working in the hardware store wasn't so bad, I told myself. It wasn't ideal that I had been fired from my dream job, which I had only started 2 years earlier, and was now laid off for the foreseeable future. That's 2020 for you. At least I wasn't unemployed, I told myself. Some people had it worse. I pulled boxes off the dolly and put them up on the shelf, ensuring that they were neatly stacked in perfectly straight rows, which would then immediately be torn to shreds by customers once the doors opened at 9 a.m. Back in the break room, my boss Brandon came over to me. He clapped me on the shoulder like he was an old friend, ignoring the social distancing policies for employees. The guy, who was probably 10 years younger than me, was my supervisor, and a real prick, I have to say. He had a businessman's haircut and a dimpled smile with big teeth that he liked to flash at you whenever he wanted you to do something. He was currently smiling at me in just that sort of way, like he wanted me to do something. "Hey, Jordan, listen, bud, I know you were saying you needed this Sunday off, but we're actually going to need to keep you on the schedule that night, and I'm going to need you to stay a little bit, 'kay?" His toothy smile was bursting at the seams, his eyebrows high with anticipation. I could practically see him salivating at the possibility of a confrontation. He really enjoyed those. He didn't have to admit that for us to see it. How late is a little late? Like 2, 3 a.m. tops. You won't get overtime because you're still under the hours for this week, but hey, money's money, am I right, buddy? Yeah, money is money, I thought to myself. And I could use the money. Even if it was barely above minimum wage, it wasn't like I had a choice after all. I always loved being voluntold to do things. Sure, no problem. I tried not to grit my teeth. So I stayed late on Sunday night. I wish I hadn't. There was only one person left with me in the store that night when Brandon called me into the back room. It was just me and Andy, a nerdy-looking guy who, like me, was underemployed at the hardware store. His degree in robotics engineering from MIT had amounted to nothing after massive layoffs at his company. He was now forced into late-night labor stocking shelves at the hardware store for pennies on the dollar compared to his previous job. I had discovered the animatronic Santa was actually his own invention. He had allowed the store to use it for display. Andy clearly had some real talent in the robotics department. The longer I worked at the store, the more I realized how sophisticated the technology in the animatronic Santa was. It could actually stand up and walk around. But that was way too creepy, so they told Andy to get it to sit still on the throne and just wave in a friendly manner so as not to frighten the children. "Jordan, come to the back office, please." The voice was loud over the walkie-talkie. I wished I could have said I hadn't have heard it. Andy would have vouched for me, but Brandon was a vengeful sort of boss, and I didn't want to make him mad. I had seen others make that mistake, and he always found creative ways to punish them. Less hours, worse assignments, bathroom cleaning duty, being forced to work weekends and holidays. He had a whole arsenal of tricks up his sleeve for retribution without it ever looking like retribution. So I went back to his office. The grin on his face was wide and toothy, and I knew without a second thought that this was going to be bad news. Okay, I know you guys are gonna hate me for this. Yeah, and? But I'm gonna need you to stay a little bit later after all. We got a shipment in of those inflatable Christmas lawn decorations, and I need you guys to get them on the shelves before we open in the morning. I had to get up in the morning at 8 a.m. to go to my other job. I was already scheduled to work until 3 a.m., and now he wanted me to stay even later? Sure, I said, defeated. I knew it was pointless to argue. Whatever I said would only result in something worse happening to me in the end. I just knew it. He was that kind of boss. A vengeful sort, as I've said. I just need to be out of here by 7 a.m. at the latest so I can go home and change for my other job. I need to be there by 8. You got it, bud. You're the boss. I'll put you down on the schedule until 7 a.m. No later than that. Alright, I'll catch you later. I'm out of here for the night. He was up and had his coat on already, heading out the door. Oh, and don't forget to tell Andy he's got to stay too, okay? I didn't have time to break the bad news to him. Alright, you guys have a good night. He went into the employee bathroom, closing the door quickly shut behind him before I could say a word. He always liked to change before leaving the store. God forbid anyone saw him in his uniform outside of there. I went out and told Andy the news. His face was a mask of anger. He wasn't happy about being told to stay, and the chicken shit way our supervisor had made me break the news. I told him Brandon was in the back getting changed if he wanted to catch him before he left. Let that prick supervisor talk to him for himself, I thought. It wasn't my job to break the bad news to employees that they had to stay late. That was not part of my job description. Andy marched back to the staff room to confront Brandon, and I was left alone with the Christmas decorations, now with a lot more work lying ahead of me than before. The weird thing was, Andy never came back. I finished the shift alone, feeling like something bad had just happened, but what it was I couldn't figure out. That morning after work I went home and quickly showered, dressed in a different uniform for a different minimum wage job, and trudged off to that place half asleep. My other job was running the cash register at a burger place, since our hardware store usually didn't have enough hours for me, and even when they did, I still found myself short on cash. Hence the 80-hour work weeks. The next shift I had at the hardware store was a couple nights later. When I went inside, everyone was acting weird. The police were waiting for me when I walked in and said they wanted to ask me a few questions, since I was one of the last people to see Brandon. I told them about Andy in the best light possible, but said that he had been upset and I assumed they had gotten into a bit of a confrontation and that I hadn't seen either of them after that. The police told me Andy was also missing. The rest of the questioning was uneventful. I explained everything I knew, which wasn't much. It sounded like Andy was a person of interest in the investigation, since they were asking a lot of questions about him and his background. I said I knew he was into robotics and that he had recently been fired from some high-paying job in that field, but other than that, I didn't know anything. The police were dissatisfied but left after that. Once again, I ended up staying late to stock the never-ending supply of Christmas decorations, and this time it was a different manager announcing it to me with an infuriating smile. Fine, I said, gritting my teeth despite my best efforts not to. 3 a.m. rolled around and everyone else had gone home. I was once again left by myself to work extended overtime. The large store was well lit but creepy nonetheless, since I was the only one in it at that late hour. I finished with the boxes I had and was taking the dolly into the back to get more, when I walked past the animatronic Santa on his throne. The thing was moving around still, but I could have sworn I had unplugged it. I walked around to the extension cord hidden beneath some white felt that was meant to look like snow. The extension cord wasn't plugged in, and yet the Santa was moving around as if it was. Weird, I said out loud. I figured it probably just had a battery, but unplugging it had always turned it off before. Climbing up to the platform to where the thing was seated, I got close to the robotic Santa and began to feel under the red suit for an off switch. It was moving back and forth jerkily. The face suddenly turned and the eyes met mine as I was reaching to try and turn it off. Usually the animatronic Santa would do this and then look away. This time though, he locked eyes with me and stared at me. his head cocked slightly as if he was thinking, studying me. "Ho, ho, ho," he suddenly bellowed, sending me reeling backwards, terrified. I screamed in surprise and fell off the platform, landing hard on the floor. My tailbone screamed out in sudden pain like a lightning bolt. "Screw it!" I got up, rubbing my backside, and walked away, leaving the thing on. It was way too creepy to mess with when I was all alone in the store at 3 o'clock in the morning. I figured I'd just let the battery die. I stacked the dolly high with boxes, and after a few minutes in the back room, I went back out into the store. I pushed the dolly back towards the seasonal display area. The sight of the empty Santa throne stopped me in my tracks. The animatronic Santa had been there not 5 minutes before, now it was gone. "Ho, ho, ho," I heard from down one of the aisles near the back of the store. In the silence of the store, I heard footsteps walking in the distance, boots moving quickly on the tile floor. I was supposed to be alone. Hello? Is someone there? There was another Night Stalker who sometimes came in at odd hours. But why he would take the robot Santa? Maybe they were moving things around. It was the only explanation I could think of. The store was quiet once again. Maybe it's not Teddy. Maybe it's someone else. Part of my mind began to race with questions to which I had no answers. I began to imagine the robot Santa Claus up and walking around the store, a large knife clutched in hand, waiting around the corner watching me. Ho, ho, ho. The sound was closer now. It wasn't possible for it to have moved so fast. It sounded like it was on the other side of me somehow. In the seasonal section where I was headed, I forced one foot in front of the other and continued to push the dolly forward. The part of my mind, using what I thought was common sense, told me not to be worried. This was a prank or a misunderstanding, not something else, not what I already knew it was. Turning the corner in the seasonal section, I found myself alone once again. I heard footfalls once again on the tile floor behind me. Ho, ho, ho. Ha, ha, ha. Hee, hee, ho, 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 ho. Shaking, I turned around and met the eyes that were so close to being human, but not quite. The animatronic Santa Claus stood watching me, blocking my exit. An axe was clutched in his hands, a price sticker still on it. Blood poured from his mouth as he continued to chuckle. I saw now that our old supervisor's head had been hidden in plain sight all along. Santa's pale face had just been a mask covering the horror beneath. The mask had fallen off, revealing Brandon's face, with metal wires pulling on the corners of his mouth and eyes to create expressions. I couldn't help but wonder where Andy, my former coworker, was now, hiding in the shadows with a remote control in his hand. I assumed he was looking to take me out. The robotic engineer turned psychopath killer was using his macabre invention to try and murder me. The robot stalked towards me, and I saw Brandon's toothy, dimpled grin stretch wider as he approached. The bloody beard was no longer white, but stained crimson red as his suit hanging ragged from his face. Ho, ho, ho. I screamed and did the only thing I could think of as he came towards me, axe in hand. I reached over and pulled with all my strength, collapsing the tall shelf next to me and bringing hundreds of carefully stacked Christmas items down in an avalanche. The shelf fell on top of him and he collapsed, the dismembered head of my old supervisor popping off and landing on the floor near my feet. The eyes rolled over and looked at me. The head without a body looked for a moment longer, then blinked. I ran away from him, screaming, leaving the store empty as I fled from there. I haven't gone back since. They've been calling and calling, but there's been no mention about an animatronic killer Santa Claus roaming around the store. They just wanted to know if I want to come in and work extra hours. The new manager says all the night staff keep disappearing on him, abandoning the place mid-shift. And some of the Christmas decorations have been going missing too.
911, what's your emergency?
For kicking me out of your little group. The little psycho ruined your pristine clique? Oh, I was unhinged? Nah. You hadn't even seen the half of what I could do. That wasn't unhinged. This is unhinged. And you only have yourselves to blame. Why do you all think you're better than me, eh?
Hello? This is 911. Do you have an emergency?
No, Greg, we don't think we're better than you. We just want you to put the hatchet down, okay?
possible domestic disturbance. Caller seems unable to speak right now, but we'll get a ping on the number to find a location.
Oh, do you, Sam? You want me to put the hatchet down? Well, how about this, Sammy boy? I'll put the weapon down if you pick it up and use it to carve up Jane's face. How does that sound? But I'll hold onto the gun, and if you make any sudden movements... Oh, quit your blubbering, Alicia. Or do you want me to cut up your face this time, eh? That would really make me sad, because it's such a beautiful one, but God, you're so annoying. Terry was no good for you, Alicia, and you should be thanking me for turning him into finely sliced sirloin steak. I mean, wasn't he always bragging about that super bod of his, making us all feel inferior? Well, now, we all get to appreciate it forever, Alicia. He spent 30 minutes in the oven. Reckon that was long enough? Yeah? We all agree? So, who wants to test him first? Who wants to see whether he tastes as good as he thought he did? Please stop! Wah! Please stop! That whining voice. Alicia, I'm this close. I swear. Don't make me cut you.
Craig, we want to be your friend. But what did you expect to happen? You almost killed my cat. We didn't feel safe around you anymore.
Yeah? Almost, Jane. Almost. I mean, didn't it ever cross your mind that I could have crushed that little flea-ridden rat at any given moment? But I didn't. It was a gesture of kindness, really. Now, I wish I had. I really do.
You're not well, Craig.
Yeah? Well, maybe. But guess what? None of you are gonna be well after this. And then you'll finally know what it's like to live in my world. We'll all be crazy forever. Hey, maybe I'll be able to join the clique then.
Address located. Whoever's on the end of this line, if you can hear me, know that officers are on their way.
Okay. I'll go first. I swear to God, Alicia. Shut up. You're about to ruin my meal. It's my first time. I've never tasted human before.
You've already tortured her enough, Craig. Just stop there.
You're really irritating me. At least Sam's handling this like a man. Right, champ? Although, I don't like you hiding in the corner over there, Sammy boy. Why don't you come and help me cut Terry up? He's tender.
Craig,
Sam, help me! Help me, Sam. Or I make you eat Alicia and Jane next.
Okay.
Good boy. Now, Jane, have you got any plates? Yeah? Okay. Well, go and get them. Be a good girl. And you might just get to skip dinner. But not you, Sam. No. I need someone to help us get through this hearty meal. Yes, 2 plates, Jane. Thank you. Get us some forks, too. Do you expect me to eat it with my hands? I'm not a savage. Thank you. Right. Well, here we go. Oh my, Sam! Back me up here. That's delicious, isn't it? Sam, that's rude. That's so rude. Try again, you're not done. And keep it down this time, or I swear to God. Good boy. Very good boy. So how did it taste the second time?
Good, Greg.
It tasted good. I get emotional after a good meal too, Sam. I really do. And we both finished our plates. But am I going to be the one to address the elephant in the room? The 6'7" tattooed elephant on the living room floor. I mean, look at how much of poor Terry we have left. That was just one of his arms, Sam. This won't do it all. We're gonna have to cook the rest of him and get the girls to help us out. I'm not a wasteful man, after all. Right, Alicia. It's your turn now. What the? Who did something naughty? Who rang the police? Sam, was it? It was you, wasn't it? Skulking in the corner. Staying away from the action. I pay too much attention to the girls. It's always the pretty ones that distract you. Right. What's your... there! Hello there? To whom am I speaking on this delightful evening?
Sir, responding officers have arrived at the scene. We're gonna need you to...
Nope! I'm gonna need you to tell me who I'm eating next.
If you could just put down the...
Give me the name, piggy. Oh, okay. It looks like I might be rushed into making a decision here.
Craig, don't do anything rash.
A name. Or they might all meet the chop. Chop, chop. Time is ticking. I'm gonna give you 3 seconds before I blow a hole through each of their brains. 5, 4, 3, 2! Me! Just choose me!
Craig Johnson was gunned down at the scene of the crime. Sam Wood, Jane Harper, and Alicia Cole were unharmed. Terry Jackson's body was brutally mutilated beyond recognition. Craig Johnson was severely mentally unwell, and whilst that was the reason for his friends cutting ties with him, it was also, sadly, the reason for his unfathomable, savage attack on them that evening.
My ex-boyfriend is very sensitive about his intelligence. Until I saw what he kept in the basement, I might have been able to move past that insecurity. Before I tell my tale, I want you to know that I'm smart. I only mention that for the sake of context. That was the first time I ever admitted it. Anyway, Matteo took me out for dinner on our half anniversary. An act of romance. And now I see it for just that. An act. Performative kindness. Smithy and I were reminiscing on university. You remember Smithy, right? Anyway, he was talking about you being too smart for me. How funny is that? I'm a lab technician. And you? Well, you teach high school science, Matthew smirked. My eyes widened. Wow. Wow. Don't take it personally. You just weren't cut out for the laboratory. And that's fine, Sonia, Matteo said. But I'm definitely smarter. I received a first-class degree. So did I replied, seething. Not only that, I was awarded top-performing graduating student. That's why Smithy was making the joke. If you'd actually bothered to turn up to the graduation ceremony, you would have known that. The man was stunned, but that wounded reaction morphed into fury. So what? I don't care about a score that you received 3 years ago, Sonia, he growled, eyes swelling with tears that seemed sorrowful and ferocious in equal measure. I sighed. I just want to go to bed. We'll talk about it in the... Sonia! A familiar voice bellowed. I twisted around to face Keith Dawson, the chemistry teacher from sixth form. His scraggly hair was greyer than I remembered, and he was standing beside a tall woman. Keith, I replied, grateful to see anything other than my boyfriend's vile face. This is my wife, Martina, he said. The elderly man and his wife squeezed into our cosy booth. It was around 8:30 in the evening, and the tables were slowly starting to empty. But time flew by. We drank coffee and conversed. I was still deeply stung by Matteo's words, but I loved him. I loved who he'd been until that evening. Say, how would you two fancy accompanying us for a nightcap? Matteo asked Keith and Sonia. I live across the road. It's a 30-second walk. Keith looked at Martina, and she shrugged. He then cast his gaze to me. Would that be okay, Sonia? The kind man asked. I already sensed that you were just being polite by entertaining your old teacher and his wife this evening. I smiled. Keith, I'd be offended if you were to say no. As we relaxed into Mateo's flat, the memory of the argument started to flee my mind. Alcohol might have helped, of course. The four of us drank whiskey in the living room. We laughed and we cried. We discussed everything from the wonders of science to our favourite Love Island contestants. Right, it's 11 o'clock, Keith drunkenly slurred. And we're not as young as you crazy kids. You better head home. Where's Martina? She went to the toilet, I said. She'll be back. Yeah, that was about an hour ago, Keith pointed out, clearly struggling to think clearly. I'll go and check on her. Though I was also quite tipsy, I laughed as the inebriated man hobbled out of the room. Finding the moment too funny to forget, I immediately texted Tess, my oldest friend. I let her know that our high school teacher was stumbling around Mateo's house drunkenly. She didn't believe me, so I followed Keith into the hallway and snapped a piece of photographic evidence. Flesh in the Grape Tower! A distant voice screamed. The unexpected disjointed exclamation sent a shockwave of fear through my body. My phone jolted out of my hand and clattered to the floor. However, in my merry stupor, I didn't think to pick it up. I simply waddled forwards, chasing the source of the sound. In a grape tower! A muffled voice loudly giggled. There was something deeply disturbing about it. The inflections of the words felt wrong, as did the varying volume. It sounded so unnatural and confused. I realised that the noise was coming from the spare room, and I was baffled to find light spilling through the doorway. The door was always locked. Mateo claimed it had been locked since he started renting the place, and he also claimed that he hadn't bothered to ask the landlord for a key. Hello? I tipsily called. Are you a... The light clicked off. Possessed by an instinctive urge to run, I found myself staring into the surprisingly spacious room. Light illuminated various shelves and boxes. It was difficult to gauge how big the space might be. From the darkness, footsteps pattered across the floor. They ricocheted off the walls, coating my back with goosebumps. I felt fear in my heart, but my head was telling me that I had to keep going. Hello? I called a second time. Give and give. Think. That disjointed voice wailed. That was when I saw her. The woman in the corner. A haunting, shadowy spectre swayed listlessly at the end of the basement. Her form was dimly outlined by the streetlight pouring through the window. She was facing the wall and murmuring something. Are you okay, Martina? I asked. The woman stopped swaying so suddenly that my heart halted. She began to twitch, violently. Guided by the streetlight, I stumbled towards the woman. Tripping over various boxes and bags, I slowly neared her, and I started to distinguish bodily features. For starters, it wasn't Martina. The woman was far too short. When I was close enough, I delicately placed a hand on the stranger's shoulder. The twitching slowed, as did her breathing. And then, at a glacial pace, her neck turned. Like a clockwork doll, her joints clicked and ached, as if she were being wound up for the first time in an age. Are you okay, miss? I quietly asked. The light caught her face, and I hurled. The woman's forehead was caving inwards, as if it were a deflated football. Skin sealed the horrific slope, but it appeared to have been haphazardly stitched into place. Her eyes were glazed, as if she were no longer able to register the world around her, and drool dripped from her ever-parted, ever-trembling lips. Yes, it has to be a thing, she jabbered nonsensically. Without warning, her hand gripped my upper arm in a vice-like hold. Never mind! Towers! Okay, Mum! She said, unleashing a hoarse cry. I'm going to get help, I shivered, prying her strong fingers from my arm. Before the damaged woman could injure me again, whether intentionally or not, I twisted to flee the room, and a warm wave of panic immediately drenched my face. There was a black silhouette in the doorway. Sleep well, Sonia, Mateo whispered. and then the black shape of a man disappeared into the darkness before me. Blind to his whereabouts, I fearfully tried to raise my hands in defense, but darkness followed a blunt, excruciating blow to the head. When I woke, my eyesight was blurry. My head felt as if it was split down the center. As I wrestled my eyelids farther apart, however, my mind started to wake. I realized I was eyeing a blindingly white surgical light above me, and when I looked away, my vision began to adjust. I was lying on an operating table in the middle of a grey, soundproofed box room, possibly only 8 by 8 feet. There were red stains on the walls. Some were fresher than others. As the ringing in my pulsating ears started to lessen, I became aware of moans. So, I lifted my head, which was a dreadful idea for 2 reasons. It was immensely painful, and it revealed a nightmarish sight. Sitting in a neat row against the wall, there were 3 women. Each of them had foreheads caved inwards, though some deformities were less prominent than others. Their eyes were lazily surveying the room, and their mouths gaped. But what broke me was the girl rocking on her legs. I recognized her. Chloe? I breathlessly whimpered. The girl's eyes didn't meet mine. She was staring at the wall with the same vacant expression as the other women. Make it better, she said. Her voice was full of jarring inflections and volume shifts, and I started to sob, remembering the girl I'd known at university. A girl who had been so bright, so full of life. What happened to you? I cried. Following a series of sudden thunderous footsteps, the door opened, and peering through it, I saw a familiar narrow window. A spare room lay beyond the grey, padded, blood-stained box. Matteo had hidden a prison of horror in his flat. How many nights did I spend above those poor mutilated women? Ah, you're awake, he said. The malicious man was carrying a squirming body over his shoulder, and he placed her beside the other 3 women. It was the lady I'd first seen in the basement. Matteo, I croaked, wriggling in my restraints. Please! I was just preparing some dinner for you ladies, Matteo said, ignoring me. The man shuffled around the cramped room and handed each of the women a separate place. It's a British roast. Food? You've seen food before, silly girls, he chuckled, whilst helping each of them out. What's wrong? Is it the meat? Is it a little tougher than usual? Matteo, I sobbed. Well, I've got a secret, the man whispered, continuing to dismiss me. It's a different cut of meat. A slightly older meat. Matteo paused, and he finally locked his eyes onto mine. They were unhinged, much like the unsavoury smile beneath, and, as I carefully inspected the food, I started to piece together the terrible turn of events. The bloody plates. The toughness of the meat. Where's Martina? Where's Keith? I whimpered. The man smiled coldly. There wasn't room for them, Sonia, but there's room for you. Matteo began to unload the contents of a tool bag, revealing an assortment of surgical instruments, and I started to scream. Why are you crying? He asked. I heavily implied that I wouldn't ever let them eat you, Sonia. There, I stated it plainly. Honestly, I thought you were smart. The man crouched down, and he grabbed Chloe's limp, lobotomized head in his hands. He placed a kiss on her caved forehead. Though it was less pronounced than the disfigurement of the 2 women beside her, it was no less horrifying. I could see the lifeless look in her eyes, the drool on her chin. Worst of all, I could hear the words from her lips. Potatoes, she whispered, before groaning painfully. Matteo laughed sinisterly. Yes, clever girl, well done. They are potatoes. You're starting to understand. I'm sorry for upsetting you, I sobbed. Just let me go, Matteo. You don't have to do this. It's only a small procedure, Sonia. You won't feel a thing. Well, you won't remember feeling a thing. You won't do much, actually. Life will be so much easier for you. We'll sit a physics test next week. Let's see who scores higher, he whispered. No, I moaned, watching Matteo remove the drill from the bag. Don't worry. I've vastly improved the procedure since Laurel. You met her. She was my first trial. But look at Chloe. She's no different, Matteo said. I cried in disbelief. She's not Chloe anymore. She's not intelligent, Mateo finished, smiling. I've freed her of that burden, and I'll free you too. As the drill started to whir, I screamed in terror. My mind braced for the horror of surviving as an unthinking shell. But as the inhuman man inched closer, a wailing noise sounded in the distance. Frowning at the sudden distraction, Mateo begrudgingly turned the drill off. It was a police siren. The man bared his menacing teeth, which no longer concealed his true malice. He looked stuck, unable to formulate a plan, but the siren neared at a rapid pace. My boyfriend finally decided to escape. The police officers missed him by a minute, and when they found us in the spare room, one of the responders vomited on the floor. Sending Tess the photo had saved my life. In my intoxicated state, I hadn't properly inspected the picture, but Tess noted Martina's bloody, unconscious body atop the kitchen table. The photo also revealed Mateo watching me from the shadowed corner of the kitchen. Whilst I searched the spare room, my murderous boyfriend apprehended Keith in the bathroom. Then, he attacked me. He clearly hadn't realised I sent the picture to someone. The 4 lobotomized women are currently living under supervised care. I visit Chloe frequently, but it's incredibly painful to do so. Such a small fragment of her remains. A damaged, incomprehensible fragment. None of her sentences make sense. I don't even know whether she exists painfully or happily. What terrifies me, above all other things, is the knowledge that Mateo is still out there.
My best friend Sarah and I had finally saved enough to embark on our much anticipated adventure to Thailand. That night, we were enjoying the vibrant nightlife of Bangkok. Sarah and I were sipping cocktails at a trendy bar in the heart of the city, soaking in the atmosphere. A stunning girl with a figure that turned heads approached us with an infectious smile and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Ava." "Hello, Ava," I responded. "Are you local?" "Yes, I am." Ava nodded. "I work part-time as a tour guide, showing tourists hidden gems of the city." "That sounds interesting," Sarah said with enthusiasm. "Can you tell us about some secret spots in Bangkok?" "Of course." Ava smiled. "I know a few places that you would definitely love." She talked about the secret spots in Bangkok with such enthusiasm that Sarah and I were instantly drawn in. Over the next few days, Ava showed us around, each site more breathtaking than the last. She knew the best street food stalls, the quietest corners of chaotic markets, and mesmerising spots that weren't on any tourist map. The more time we spent with her, the more we trusted her. Ava was not just a guide, she became our friend. One evening, Ava suggested a visit to a luxurious massage parlour. "It's not known to many tourists," she said with a wink, "but I take all my friends there." Trusting her completely, Sarah and I agreed without hesitation. The massage parlour was tucked away in a quieter part of the city. Inside, the atmosphere was calming, with soft music and dim lighting. We were led into a beautifully decorated room with 2 massage tables. The masseuses greeted us warmly, and soon we were both drifting into relaxation under the skilled hands of our therapists. However, as the massage progressed, I began to feel unusually drowsy. I tried to shake off the sleepiness, attributing it to jet lag and the relaxing environment. Glancing over at Sarah, I noticed she seemed equally lethargic, her movements sluggish. "Sarah, are you feeling okay?" I whispered, my voice slurring slightly. She looked at me with half-closed eyes, struggling to keep them open. "I don't know. I feel so tired," she mumbled. When I woke up, I found myself in Sarah in a stark, dimly lit room. The walls were made of rough, cold concrete, and the floor was covered in grime. The air was thick with the smell of damp and mould, and our wrists were bound tightly with rough rope. My clothes felt dishevelled, as if they had been disturbed, adding to my growing sense of unease. "Sarah, wake up!" I hissed, shaking her gently. "We need to get out of here." Sarah groaned and slowly opened her eyes, confusion and fear spreading across her face. "Where are we?" What happened? I don't know, but we need to move fast, I replied, my voice trembling. We knew we had to act fast before they moved us to a location from which escape would be impossible. Sarah, look at these ropes, I whispered, examining the bindings on my wrists. They're not as tight as they seem. We might be able to get out of them. Sarah nodded, determination replacing fear in her eyes. Let's do it. Using the sharp edge of a broken tile we found on the floor, we managed to fray the ropes enough to slip our hands free. Our hearts pounded as we worked, terrified that someone would come in and catch us at any moment. Once our hands were free, we quietly made our way to the door. It was locked, but we could hear voices outside. We waited until the voices faded, then used a piece of metal we found to pick the lock. It was a skill I had learned from my brother, who always joked it might come in handy someday. I never thought he'd be right. The door finally creaked open, and we slipped out into the dimly lit hallway. We moved as silently as possible, our senses on high alert. Do you think we're going the right way? Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. I don't know, but we have to keep moving, I replied, glancing around nervously. Finally, we found a window that led to a small alleyway. It was a tight squeeze, only big enough for one person to pass through at a time, and it would take some effort to get through. Sarah, you go first, I urged, trying to hide the panic in my voice. Sarah nodded and began to climb through the window, but as she struggled to fit through the small opening, a wave of fear and self-preservation washed over me. If she went first, I might not have enough time to escape. The realization hit me hard, and a selfish, desperate instinct took over. Sarah, hurry! I urged, my voice trembling with urgency. Just as Sarah was halfway through the window, we heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching rapidly from the corridor. Panic surged through me. If they caught us now, we'd have no chance. Sarah, faster! I hissed, trying to push her through. But the footsteps were getting closer, and I knew we were running out of time. In a split-second decision, driven by sheer survival instinct, I grabbed her legs and yanked her back into the room, the force of my pull causing her to fall heavily to the ground. She looked up at me in shock and betrayal, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice breaking, as I scrambled through the window myself. I managed to slip through and hit the ground outside just as the door behind us burst open. Ava and two men stormed in, their faces twisted with rage. Run! I screamed, knowing it was too late for Sarah, but hoping to save myself. I ran as fast as I could, not daring to look back. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in ragged gasps. The alleyway seemed endless, but I forced myself to keep going. I didn't stop until I reached a busy street, where I flagged down a taxi and begged the driver to take me to the nearest police station. I told the police everything, and they promised to launch an investigation. However, days turned into weeks, with no significant progress. Determined to find Sarah, I stayed in Thailand for 2 weeks, tirelessly gathering information. I joined forces with Sarah's family, who had flown in immediately after hearing the news. Together we combed through the neighbourhoods, spoke with locals, and approached shady establishments, hoping to uncover any clues. During this time, I grew close to Sarah's family. Her mother, a strong yet heartbroken woman, often shared stories of Sarah's childhood, trying to keep her spirit alive amidst the despair. I felt their anguish deeply, but couldn't confess that in my desperate bid to survive, I had left Sarah behind the night she was taken. Despite our relentless efforts, the trail remained cold. The traffickers seemed to have vanished without a trace, leaving us feeling increasingly helpless. Eventually, reality caught up with me. My job back home was at risk, and my family needed me. With a heavy heart, I realized I couldn't continue my search indefinitely. Reluctantly, I booked a flight back to my country, promising myself that this was not the end of my quest for justice. Sarah's family decided to stay in Thailand, driven by hope. As I boarded the plane, I felt a deep sense of sorrow, as if I was abandoning Sarah all over again. Back home, I resumed my life, but the memories of Thailand and Sarah's unresolved fate haunted me. I stayed in touch with Sarah's family and the organisations we had worked with, hoping for any breakthrough in the case.
To the man under my house, thank you. Thank you so much. I live in a small 1,100 square foot ranch-style home. I've lived here for 7 years and never had a complaint until just last year. My wife and I always joked that our home was haunted. Things were always moving around or disappearing completely from where they were left last. "You have a terrible memory," my wife would say, blaming me when something went missing. "When you lose something, it's just a ghost, but when I do, I'm an idiot?" More than a few dumb arguments started because of these paranormal events that took place. My wife was convinced the ghost made its home in our basement, claiming that when she goes down to do laundry, it watches her. "I can feel it," she tried to convince me. Didn't have any clue how close to right she was. It was a dark Sunday night, not just some "it's getting late" darkness, but an eerie, star-obscured pitch black. Our weekend was nearing a close and our sights had shifted to work the following morning. We couldn't have been less prepared for the impending chaos. My wife was lying on the couch, reading a book while completely under a blanket, one of her many lovable quirks. "I always did it as a kid, and it reminds me of being young," she told me with a smile, back when I first caught her doing it before we were married. I had been working on my laptop, preparing for a deadline that I had been underprepared for that upcoming week. From under the blanket, just a few feet away on the couch, I heard my wife's "I need you to do something" voice. "Sweetie?" I rubbed my eyes and looked over at the shifting blanket as she peeked out from underneath. "Yes?" "Will you get the laundry from the dryer?" I sighed. I knew she had scared herself with whatever she was reading and now wouldn't go down to the basement because of it. "Fine," I said, annoyed by the minor inconvenience but secretly glad to get away from my computer. "I love you." I could hear the words as they exited her smiling lips. "I love you too, goofball." I covered her face again with a blanket. I began to march to the basement, flicking on the light switch at the top of the stairs and slowly trudging down the creaking wooden steps. The basement has always been a good 10 or more degrees cooler than the rest of our home, a fact that didn't help to ease my wife's fear of being alone in it. It is completely unfinished with cement floors and exposed wooden beams in the walls. I had intended on finishing it when I had the money, but that day had yet to come. The dryer was off with a green light blinking, indicating a finished load. I pulled open the door and started heaving the clothes in large two-handed hugs into a basket. Before I had finished, I heard something pop, followed by the sound of wood hitting concrete. My heart jumped. As afraid as I was in the moment, I knew I couldn't justify my wife's fear of the damned souls looming in our basement. I gathered myself and then walked around a corner wall to another empty square room where the sound had originated from. Along an internal section of wall nearest the ceiling was a now open and dark tunnel-like space that was comprised of earth and, in some spots, support structures of the house. On the hard cement floor was a piece of wood that had covered the crawl space originally. How did this fall? I asked myself. I considered in that moment getting my hammer and nails to cover the space again, but as I stood in the small section of the basement that I had seldom visited, I felt something. I felt someone. The sensation of someone watching me was undeniable. I hadn't felt it during my previous visitations to the basement. However, in my wife's defense, she did the laundry far more often than I. I stood there motionless as I looked into the dark crawl space that I hadn't known existed. "Hello?" I called, hoping my wife wouldn't hear. "Ryan!" she called from upstairs, her voice muffled by the floorboards that separated us. She never used my name like that unless it was serious. I pried my eyes from the deep abyss and ran up the stairs as fast as my body would allow. "What's going on?" I said, panting and looking around the living room. The blanket on the couch was vacant now. "Sweetie, don't fuck with me. I could have tripped up those damn stairs." There was nothing. I never knew her to be a prankster, nor was she sneaky in any sense of the word. I made for our bedroom, which is nearest the rear of the home. The lights were off, and I hadn't had my phone on me. I walked inside and could only make out our messy bed illuminated by the light that barely crept in from the living room. "Christina?" It was then that they made themselves known. A man gripped my throat from behind me. I struggled as much as I could, the sheer surprise and terror coursing through my veins. He tightened his grip as I wrapped my fingers around the door frame. He had been directing our struggle into the hallway, and I wasn't going easily. When I thought I was finally shaking his grip loose, a second person approached us and rammed my head into the wall. I could feel the blood leaking down my face slowly. My vision was faded now, and motor skills had been dialed down to 2. They silently directed my body back to the basement stairs and tossed me down. Christina. I could barely even formulate her name with my lips as I stained the concrete with my blood. I tried to lift myself, but sent a shock of pain through my arm as I realized I had broken several fingers. I lifted my head and watched as 3 figures made their way down the basement stairs behind me. The last one had her in his arms. She was bound like a trophy deer and unable to speak through the duct tape that was wrapped several times around her head. Fuck you, I managed. They dropped her carelessly to the floor with a thud. I shook my head and felt tears filling my eyes. One of the men approached me and grabbed my leg before dragging me closer to her in the center of the basement. I tried to look into her eyes. They had hit her too hard and now she was barely conscious. It's okay. You're gonna be alright, I mumbled quietly through my tears to her, unsure she could even hear me. Behind us, the 3 men had been gathered, silently whispering to one another as they pulled supplies out of a duffel bag. My strength had left me completely. I was sure that I had broken a leg as well as my fingers, and my head injury made comprehension of anything a difficult task. I shifted my hand that still had function up to my face and wiped away the blood and tears from my eyes. The men had dispersed and began making a shape on the ground around my wife and I with spray paint. They filled the room with odd rune-like symbols before lighting candles. "What is this?" I yelled through my pain. The men were unfazed and continued finishing up the process. I heard a muffled grumble coming from my side. I writhed over and saw her blinking back to consciousness. "Shh, it's okay," I said, broken-hearted and panicked. I watched tears fall from her cheeks onto the cold ground. A hard kick to my ribs pulled me out of the moment, and I could hear her whimpering through the tape. The men were laughing. The sadistic fucks laughed as they took turns kicking me and my wife as we lay helpless on the ground. I could hear her gasping for air, and suddenly none of my pain mattered. When they finally grew tired, I struggled to listen as they whispered something about sacrifice. I needed it to end, her suffering. I couldn't watch her in pain, choking and crying in a puddle of her own making. The flashbacks came as every story and movie predict. She was so beautiful the day we first met. Sarcastic but quick to apologize if she thought she offended you. She loved laughter and only lived to please the people around her, selfless and gentle. There was a change in the demeanor of our attackers, where before everything was a game to them, now they seemed much more serious. One of them approached Christina with a small knife in hand.
"Through pain, through suffering, we summon thee."
His voice spoke, breaking their long silence. I couldn't watch as he hunched down over her, silent tears falling from her eyes. "Please," I said, desperate for divine intervention. And then he came. From the corner basement room, a strange figure shambled into view. He then appeared to be gaunt and naked, but my blurry vision failed to harvest any detailed imagery. The men were transfixed with the violent ritual they were performing, and so the man went unnoticed. I didn't need clear vision to perceive how lightning quick his reflexes were. I resisted the urge to blink as he disarmed the man with the knife and cut out his Adam's apple. The other men stood shocked and hesitant to react. When one of them finally dared to retaliate, he found himself face first on the ground with stab wounds up and down his legs, rendered incapable of walking. The third man had clearly gone into a state of shock. He attempted to flee toward the stairs, but the naked man caught him quickly and viciously carved at his face. I couldn't fathom what was going on. My wife was whimpering still, but had as full a view to what was happening as I did. The naked man stood to his feet, covered in blood and clenching the knife. He approached me slowly, turning me onto my back to face him. I could see now that he hardly looked human at all. His arms and legs were covered in what must have been years' worth of exposure to dirt, and his eyes glowed like a cat's in the dark. I attempted again to wipe my eyes when he held out his hand. He was grasping the blade of the knife now, and toward me he pointed the hilt. I accepted. He lifted me to my feet and directed me toward the second man, who he had rendered unable to walk.
No, please,
he said, visibly trembling. Those words meant as much to me then as they did to him just a few minutes before. I won't say here what happened next. I can't. But the next morning, after a lot of deliberation, the police and several ambulances escorted 3 corpses from the property. My wife and I are blessed. We shouldn't be alive, and yet here we are a year later. She's pregnant now, and we can't wait for our family to grow from 3 to 4. I still don't know much about the man under my house. He respects our space, and we respect his. What we do know now is that he loves fried food. There's not much you can do to say thank you to someone who saved the life of your entire family, but I think that a bucket of fried chicken every night is a good start. From our family to yours, stay safe.
911. What is the nature of your emergency?
I need help. Please hurry. It's not... Oh, I don't have time. I don't have time.
Deep breaths, ma'am. I'm going to need you to start from the beginning. As hard as that may be, what is the nature of your emergency?
My name's Sandra Bloom, and I'm staying at the Basilisk Hotel on 4th Avenue. Do you know the one? How long will it take you to get here?
Sandra, I'm going to need some information about the nature of your emergency before I dispatch officers.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize that I hadn't told you what was happening. It's just, I'm so terrified. I don't know what to do, and I'm struggling to think clearly. Okay, the beginning. Oh my word, Right. I'm on holiday in Atlanta. Wait, you know that because I'm ringing the police department in Atlanta. Sorry, my brain is so frazzled.
Take it easy, Sandra. It's okay. I'm here. But the sooner you explain what's happening in that hotel room, the sooner I dispatch officers to your location. Just take me through the events that led to this phone call, okay?
Okay, I'll try. Right. I was taking a shower, and it started with a creak. Only the slightest sound. Barely perceptible. The sort of sound that the person should dismiss. Nothing too loud or alarming in itself, but it felt off to me. The hairs on the back of my neck raised, not the natural sound of foundations settling or water flowing through pipes. No, it was a heavy, groaning sound. And when I looked up, I saw him.
Him?
A man. I'm in the room alone, and there's a stranger in my ceiling.
In your ceiling? I'm not sure what you mean, Sandra. How did you...
There was a slight crack in the tile above me. It had been loosened from its fitting, and I saw the tile wiggle. It was a reflection in the metalwork of the shower head, and when my eyes shot to the mirrored image, I saw eyes peering at me from the gap between 2 tiles. The light of the bathroom caught a few facial features. Brown eyes, a dreadful, creepy smile.
Okay, Sandra. I've dispatched officers to your location. Are you still in the hotel room?
Yes, I didn't want to let the man know that I'd seen him. I was afraid that he'd do something if he were aware that he'd been detected. I'm just shaking in the bedroom, eyeing the bathroom door. The darkened room beyond, I can hear creaks from the ceiling. What if he climbs down? I'm so scared.
Sandra, I want you to leave the room right now and go to the main reception. Tell them what you just told me and wait there for responders to arrive. Do you understand?
I think he might have heard me.
You need to leave the room right now, Sandra. Sandra!
Yes, I'm okay. I'm okay. I made it out of the room. I'm running down the stairs. I don't want to wait for the lift.
I want you to find the nearest member of staff and wait with them, okay? The police are on their way. It'll be about 10 minutes until they arrive. Stay on the phone with me, Sandra. Stay on the phone.
Help! Help! You work here, right?
Yes, are you okay, ma'am?
No! There's a man in my room. He's hiding in the ceiling.
I beg your pardon?
A man.
In my room, hiding in the ceiling. Oh, wait, not to worry, ma'am. This is nothing, absolutely nothing. Don't panic. Wait here in the lobby with me and we'll get to the bottom of this misunderstanding. Yes, that's all it'll turn out to be. We'll need to ring the, who's on the phone? The police! I've already rung them. I'm talking to them now. Tell the operator that we tried to catch him before, but many of the officers already know that. After repeated failed attempts over the past 6 years, Michael Longton was eventually caught by police officers at 10:46 p.m. on Friday the 8th, March 2024. It was the 5th reported incident at this hotel, but Longton had always succeeded in fleeing the scene before police action could be taken. When Longton was arrested and escorted out of the hotel, he offered one final smile to Sandra Blake, a haunting confirmation that he was, in fact, the dreadful man she'd seen hiding in the ceiling tiles of the bathroom, the vile pervert who'd been spying on her. She would recognize that smile anywhere. The grin composed of yellow teeth, separated by blackened holes of missing canines.
Wouldn't you like to know how close you were?
Michael screamed, cackling at Sandra. The suspect has declined to answer comments about that statement to the victim in question, but the investigation revealed the lurker to be a cleaner who had worked at the hotel for 10 years, and given that only 5 incidents were ever reported, it is believed that he likely spied on numerous other guests during his time at the hotel. He just wasn't noticed. The cleaner was, of course, incredibly familiar with the hotel's layout. That is what allowed him to flee the scene on other occasions, resulting in little to no conclusive evidence. The police discovered by investigating his mobile phone that he had been spying on other women, nearing 300 different victims. His mobile phone contained a large number of illegal photos and videos. He will face legal action.
This trip to Thailand had been Mark's idea. A spontaneous holiday he had insisted upon, saying it would be a perfect way to escape the routine and spend quality time together. When my parents coincidentally had a break in their busy schedules, they agreed to join us, seeing it as an opportunity to relax and perhaps get to know Mark better. Coming from a wealthy family, my relationship with Mark, a dedicated but modestly earning drain specialist, had always been under the scrutinizing gaze of my parents. Although they were always polite to him, their lack of warmth was evident. They couldn't hide their disdain for his humble background. On our 3rd evening, Mark suggested we dine at a local restaurant we had discovered. It was a quaint place tucked away in an older part of Bangkok, exuding an authentic charm. The food was exceptional. My father, usually a man of few words, couldn't help but comment on the exquisite flavours. "This Tom Yum goon is incredible," he said, his tone carrying a hint of genuine admiration. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere at the table grew increasingly warm and convivial. Laughter punctured our conversation, and the initial stiffness that had characterized our interactions had begun to melt away. However, the following morning, our world was turned upside down. My parents were missing from their room, which showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. Only their luggage remained. Mark and I spent the next few days searching tirelessly for any clues about my parents' whereabouts. We visited nearby hospitals, checked with other hotels, and even combed through local markets and tourist spots, hoping that someone might have seen them. The police were also notified, but there was no progress. We checked the surveillance footage, but it didn't provide any clues. After weeks with no progress, we returned home, the mystery of my parents' disappearance casting a shadow over our lives. Yet during these trying times, Mark and I found solace in each other. Mark proposed to me one quiet evening at home. We began planning our wedding, dreaming of a small, intimate ceremony. 1 month after our return, I discovered I was pregnant. The news filled us with a mix of joy and anxiety, given the circumstances. Yet planning for our child's arrival brought us even closer. We spent evenings discussing names, decorating the nursery, and imagining our future as a family. These moments of shared happiness and anticipation provided a much-needed respite from the ongoing investigation. But the peace was short-lived. 2 months later, a breakthrough in the investigation prompted my return to Thailand. Alone this time, as Mark, on the night before his flight to Thailand, suddenly claimed that his father had collapsed due to high blood pressure and needed immediate medical attention. He insisted on staying behind to handle the emergency, promising to join me in Thailand as soon as he could. Upon arrival, I was summoned to the police station, where a stern-looking officer introduced himself as Officer Somchai. He led me into a small, dimly lit room and gestured for me to sit down. His expression was grave, and I could sense that what he was about to tell me would change everything. "Miss Emily," he began, his voice steady and serious, "we have made significant progress in the investigation into your parents' disappearance. I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "Your fiancé, Mark, is not who you think he is. We have gathered evidence that implicates him in a heinous crime. The restaurant where you had your last meal with your parents is owned by a close associate of Mark's. We have obtained security footage showing Mark and his associate handling large, suspicious bags late at night." I shook my head in disbelief. "No, that can't be true. Mark would never—" Officer Somchai raised a hand to stop me. "I understand this is difficult to hear, but the evidence is overwhelming. We found traces of blood and DNA in a hidden basement below the restaurant. This basement was used to commit the murders. Your parents were drugged, taken there, and brutally killed." He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in before continuing. "The security footage we recovered was heavily damaged, but our forensic team used advanced technology to restore it. The footage clearly shows Mark and his associate moving your parents' unconscious bodies into the basement." Tears streamed down my face as I struggled to comprehend his words. "No, there must be some mistake. Mark loves me. He would never hurt my parents." Officer Somchai's expression softened slightly. "I know this is hard to accept, but we have witnesses who saw Mark and his friend acting suspiciously. The tools used for dismemberment were found, and they matched the DNA evidence." He took a deep breath before delivering the most horrifying detail. "The remains were processed and stored in the restaurant's refrigeration units. Mark and his friend gradually disposed of the remains by mixing small portions into the meat supplies used for regular dishes served to unsuspecting patrons. This gruesome detail was corroborated by several employees who noticed unusual activities and odd smells, but were too afraid to question their employers. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented by Officer Somchi, a part of me refused to believe it. The Mark I knew was kind, loving, and dedicated. The details seemed too monstrous to align with the person I had shared my life with. Officer Somchai continued, his tone growing even more serious. "Miss Emily, there's one more thing you need to know. Mark's associate has confessed and provided us with Mark's motive. According to the associate, Mark felt deeply resentful towards your parents. They looked down on him because of his humble background and demanded a substantial dowry of 200,000 yuan as a condition for approving your marriage. Mark saw this as an insurmountable obstacle and a profound insult. It fueled his anger and ultimately led him to plot this heinous act." He hesitated before adding another chilling detail. "After the murders, Mark and his associate went a step further. They cooked the meat from your parents' bodies and served it as breakfast the next morning. The staff and patrons, including yourself, unknowingly consumed it. This barbaric act was meant to ensure that the evidence would be disposed of quickly and to further humiliate your parents even in death." My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I was determined to confront Mark and hear his side of the story. I couldn't believe what the police were saying about him being involved in such a heinous crime, and I needed to know the truth from his own lips. Now, as I sat on the plane back home, I clutched my growing belly, feeling the gentle movements of our unborn child. My heart was heavy with doubt and fear, but also with a desperate hope that there was some explanation, some misunderstanding that could clear his name. The plane began its descent, and I steeled myself for the confrontation that awaited. The truth, whatever it may be, was just hours away.
911. What is your emergency? I think my husband wants to kill me. I need you to take some deep breaths with me and stay calm. What's your name? Clarissa? Okay. Hello, Clarissa. Do you think you'd be able to tell me what's happening? He's in the basement again, working on something for me, and I'm in the living room. Your husband? Yes. Okay. Has he hurt you? Yes, many times. I've called before. You sent someone, but he didn't like that. And I regretted it, but I'm calling again. I don't know what else to do. Well, I'm glad you did, Carissa. And you might not like this, but I'm going to have to send someone again. What's your address? 36 Oak Drive. Thank you. I've dispatched 2 officers, and they'll be with you within the next 15 minutes. I'm going to stay on the phone with you and... No, that's too long. It's okay, Clarissa. Remember what I said about staying calm? Yes, I'm taking deep breaths. Does your husband know that you're calling us? Are you safe right now? No, he doesn't know, but I don't think I've ever been safe in this house. I think that's impossible. Has he said or done anything this evening that threatened your life? Are you in immediate danger? Or did he go down to the basement to leave you alone? No, he won't be down there for long. He said he's finally reached his limit with me, and it's time to put me in the ground with the last one. I asked what he meant, and he just said, Ella. That's his ex-wife who, well, she went missing years ago. Everyone thought she ran away, but I think he means he killed her. Gerald doesn't joke around, and he certainly doesn't lie. He said to sit tight and he'd be back with something to shut me up for good. And when was that? That was a few minutes ago, just before I made this call. And did this conversation take place in the living room? Yes. And now he's in the basement. He hurts me down there. Sometimes. He has all of his tools down there. Right. Okay. Clarissa, I want you to stay calm, but I think it might be a good idea for you to leave the house. Do you have any neighbors to... I can't! I know it's scary, but you can, Clarissa. I just need you to... No, I physically can't. After we argued last night, Gerald spent all morning boarding up the doors. And he spent the rest of the day hurting me. I messaged my brother, you see. I wasn't supposed to do that without permission. Okay, Clarissa. I think we need to devise a new plan then. Is there anywhere in the house that you'd be safe for the next 14 minutes? Perhaps less time than that. It all depends on how quickly our officers can get to you. He knows all of my usual hiding places. Is there anywhere that you've never chosen before? There's the wardrobe in the spare room. I thought about hiding there once, but it's stuffed full of clothes. And I guess it's perfect for that reason. I mean, neither of us ever uses that room. Gerald's a hoarder, and it's full of his old junk. Okay, well, I think you should hide there. You know, he's been quiet for the past minute or so. I don't know whether... Clarissa, I need you to go upstairs and hide in the wardrobe, okay? Okay, I'm going. I think we need to talk quietly in case he hears us. I'm heading over to the stairs now. I'm not sure. I just walked past the basement door and it's It's just so quiet. Keep moving, Clarissa. Our officers will be there in no time at all. Okay. I'm headed up the stairs. I'm trying to be quiet. I'm gonna have to move the clothes from the wardrobe discreetly. Could you hide beneath them? I'd have to take some out, but I suppose so. Okay. I'm taking out a small pile of them and... Oh, it's so cramped in here. Boxes everywhere. I don't know where to put them. I'll just... Oh no. What? He just called for me. I have to hurry. Stay on the phone with me, Clarissa, and remember to stay quiet. I'm trying to wiggle my way inside, okay? I think this could... Yeah, this works. I've done it. Okay. I did it. And now I just need to stay still. Are you safe now? I don't know. He's coming upstairs. Let's be quiet for a second, Clarissa.
Sweetie, I'm sorry for shouting at you. I had a bit of time to reflect, shall we say. And I'm all better now. In fact, I'm better than I've ever been. Now, why don't you come out so we can talk things through, eh? It's so silly that you hide from me when we have our little tiffs. I mean, what did you think? I'd really hurt you? Come on now. Where are you, honey? I'm getting a little bit bored now. Are you in the bathroom? No. Not in there. Are you? Oh, sweetie. If you were gonna hide, you should have... Oh dear, that's just silly.
No. Clarissa?
Somebody got her dress caught in the doors. Dead giveaway.
Clarissa, are you okay? False alarm. Responding officers found Gerald Lane sitting amidst the boxes of the spare room. He had stuffed Clarissa Lane's dismembered carcass into a box labeled Nostalgia. Gerald Lane was a severely unwell narcissist. Clarissa Lane had reported his abusive tendencies for months, but officers never made any arrests. 911, what's your emergency? I think somebody's trying to break into my home. It sounds like they are coming through the car garage. All right, sir. Can you tell me your name and address? Yeah, it's Hank Lassiter, and I live on Lupine Road off of 553. I'm alone right now. My son's at a sleepover. Okay, we have that information. It may take a bit of time for units to arrive, but I can stay on the line until then. Jesus Christ, how long? What if this person breaks in and kills me? Do you have somewhere that you can hide in your home? I have an old attic by the washroom, but I might get stuck up there. You'll need to find a safe location until officers arrive. Where else? Is there a closet or a bathroom you can barricade yourself in? Hold on. I'm going to try to get into the attic. I might lose my signal. Hank, try to keep the call from being disconnected. Hank, I think I lost you. All units, be advised we have a possible home invasion. Address is on Lupine Road. Did not get exact house number yet. We will keep lines open so that the homeowner can attempt to call back in. 911, what's your emergency?
Yeah, I'm stepping into my house right now, and I'm pretty sure that someone has gotten inside already. I think it's a break-in.
All right, sir. Can you give me your name and address?
My address is Lupine Road. Hold on just a check and see if anything has been stolen.
Lupine Road. Is this Hank?
That's right. How do you know my name?
You called less than 10 minutes ago. Do you not remember?
No, I think I'd remember that. Hold on. Are you saying someone else called from inside my house?
This is highly unusual. Can you hold while I attempt to speak to my supervisor?
Hold on. I need to know if my house has a burglar inside it. I think I'm entitled to protect myself. I can protect my family. My son's upstairs. I think.
You aren't sure where your son's at?
Like I said, I just stepped in the house. Can you tell me what's going on?
Sir, my recommendation is you wait outside your home. We already have 2 officers on their way, and they will be there soon.
This is rich. The invader called you? Wow. Guess that's smart.
Sir, please be cautious. If there's a threat, you shouldn't enter your home.
I'm not gonna crawl up in a hole and hide. I'm an American veteran. And no coward is gonna break into my home and get away with it.
All units be advised we have a discrepancy with a secondary caller. At this moment, it is unclear who is the homeowner. Stand by for further information. 911, what's your emergency? This is Hank. I called earlier. That burglar is somewhere downstairs. I think they found my gun. Sir, if it's all the same to you, can I ask you a few questions about your home? What? What kind of game is this? We don't have time for 20 questions. Are there units on the way? How long have you lived at the residence? Are you really doing this? Look, I don't have time for games. I want this handled before my son gets home. I don't want him walking in and getting hurt. I'll go down there and defend myself if I have to. I won't die in this hidey hole because y'all are busy trying to find out my life story. We're doing our best to assist you, Hank. But there's been a bit of a kink in the plans, so to speak. The person inside your house is also claiming to be you.
What does that even mean?
They claim you are the home invader, and we need to determine the truth before we can move forward.
You serious? Okay, sure. I can answer. While I try my best to keep my dang cell phone from cutting out and some psycho doesn't kill me.
Hank, if you can focus, I can verify a lot of this information online with what we have on file for your residence.
I think... Don't get... Cannot...
Your signal's full of static. Please try to not move. Hank, are you there? Unit 334, I haven't been able to verify anything about the homeowner.
This puts us in a bit of a bind, Eddie. Dang it. Whoever's doing this is a smart cookie.
I think we should attempt to phone the landline. Maybe contact the second man who claims to be the homeowner.
We're almost at the residence. I said we just go in there and arrest them both. We can sort this out at the station.
Be advised, the second caller found a firearm. I would consider them hostile. The first caller is hiding in the attic. If I were to toss a coin, I would consider them to be the homeowner.
Try and make that call, Eddie. You got 5 minutes before we bust the door down. Hello? Who is this?
This is emergency dispatch, Mr. Lassiter. I called your landline. Have you located the burglar?
I think they're in the attic. I fired a few random shots, but they haven't come down.
Sir, you need to listen to what I'm telling you right now. Lower your weapon and go outside. The officers will come in and find the other person inside your house.
Why am I not allowed to defend my home? This is my property. Come out from there. I'm playing this game. This is my house.
Hank, you can still be considered to be guilty of manslaughter if the burglar is unarmed. You need to comply with the law and let us sort this out.
What a load of crap. Are you saying I have to prove that I own this house?
We can get this all sorted out at the station. We will arrest the person in your attic, but you must comply.
Hold on. Someone else is trying to call.
You need to leave my home now. I have an axe, and I will use it against you. Don't do anything stupid.
Your home? Your home? You want to take that bet against my Mossberg rifle?
Be advised, police are entering the home now.
Both men have been apprehended. We've got some major blood loss here. Call an ambulance.
The 2 callers, both claiming to be Hank Lassiter, were taken to the local Bethlehem Medical Center, where tests were run to determine their true identity. During the test, the second caller, the one who claimed to be Hank coming home from work, managed to escape custody. Security footage shows that despite the injuries that the second man sustained, he was able to climb out of the fourth-story window and shimmy down the fire escape. Upon the end of the tests, it was determined that the first caller was the real Hank Lassiter. The police were able to apprehend the second caller and determine that it was a neighbor of Mr. Lassiter named Michael Wiend. After obtaining a warrant to search the house, police determined that Mr. Wiend had been surveying the Lassiter property for the past few weeks and had planned to take out his neighbor. Mr. Wiend had bought several kits to adjust his appearance, attempting to look like Mr. Lassiter, and during interrogation he confessed he planned to kill his neighbor and replace him. The motive for this was due to the loss of Mr. Wiend's son. It was confirmed at one time the son of Mr. Lassiter went to the same school. It is believed Mr. Wiend intended to replace his neighbor and take the role of being the boy's father. Mr. Wiend is in police custody and has been scheduled for several mandatory therapy sessions.